Good afternoon. My name is Rob Mattern with Mattern, and I'm honored to be here with Bill Mech of ofPartner, semi-retired. Bill, how are you doing there?
Very well, thank you.
Okay. You look very casual and relaxed, which is great to see.
Trying to do more of that.
Yep, can't blame you there. Okay. Our discussion today is going to be on how to improve administrative efficiency. Before we get started, just some basic housekeeping rules. If you would like to participate, which we encourage, or ask a question, obviously take yourself off mute, introduce yourself, ask your question. We do ask that you do go back on mute afterwards. If you want to submit questions through chat, we will try to work them in as time allows. And if we don't get to them, we'll follow up afterwards with a response. And lastly, and I know I just said this about keeping yourself on mute, please do, just to keep down the background noise. We've had some funny situations happen over the years. So at the conclusion of our discussion today, there's going to be a couple exit questions, just, hey, how do we do? What other topics would you like to see, etc. So we ask you that you fill those out. Bill, you all set to dig in?
Absolutely, ready to go.
Okay. I want to start off with a story. I was very fortunate to be born in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, a little town northeast. And my family owns or owned a flower business, which is actually still there. And my father, who ran the business, used to say, really, there's three things we got to focus on. Number one, you have to get the orders. Number two, you got to sell quality. And three, you got to deliver in a timely fashion. And the first about getting the orders, pretty obvious, but we used to have these picture windows out in front of our flower shop, and they were always decorated to the max. You always had knowledgeable people answer the phone in a quiet environment who knew our levels of stock and what we had to push. You used to say that a poinsettia wasn't worth too much on December 26th. Big on quality. Another part of the family owned a wholesaler, so we used to kind of get the pick of the litter, and the quality would be excellent. And then lastly, timely delivery. And it's almost really what Amazon is built on, but my father thought about this about 60 years ago, that he would hire policemen from all the neighboring towns to deliver at holiday times. They usually were off work. They knew the streets. If they were caught speeding, really wasn't an issue. But you had a flexible labor force there. You used to bring them in, deliver, and get these orders out as soon as possible. So it's really brilliant. I mean, my father never even graduated high school, but he thought about all this stuff. The same is true of your administrative services. There's really three things you got to focus on. And the first is knowing your costs. If I ask anyone out there, what are your costs to produce a document in your document processing department? How many firms know that? And I'm going to venture to guess some do, but probably a lot don't. And in order to manage anything, you got to know what those costs are and the quantity. If you're looking at attorneys' non-billable time and you want to control that and improve that, you have to know, one, how much of their time is non-billable, which typically is about 25 to 35% of their time is on non-billable tasks, and 10 to 25% is on non-billable administrative tasks. There's going to be obviously some pro bono work in there, marketing and so on like that, sales. However, approximately 25% of that time is spent on administrative tasks. So we want to quantify that, or a lot of firms are looking to quantify that when we do this administrative benchmarking. And then third, you got to create a plan, or really second, you got to create a plan that is going to be implementable, that's going to make sure that your administrative operation runs as efficiently and cost effectively as possible. and reduces the amount of administrative time that attorneys are spending. 1 hour, we could get 1 hour back from the attorneys and turn it into a billable hour. Okay, at a rate of, just pulling a rate $800 an hour, 250 attorneys, it's over $40 million a year in additional revenue. So want to know what these people are doing with their non-billable and administrative tasks. Second of all, we got to create a plan that's going to make sure that the operation is as cost-effective and efficient as possible, whether that's in-house or outsourced. And lastly, and again, getting through steps 1 and 2 here, is I have to make sure I implement flawlessly. Okay? I can't stub my toe coming out of the gate. So there's ways to do that to make sure that I ensure success. And I roll out something that's going to work not only in the short term, but in the long term as well. Okay, so there are the 3 keys. Just like my father had 3 keys to run a flower shop, these were the 3 keys to make your administrative services as cost effective as possible.
Rob, I think you're absolutely correct. But I actually think, and I'd be curious what the audience thinks, that I think step 3 is where most of us fail. A lot of us learn a lot of different ways about things that are broken in our firms or challenges that need addressed, which addresses, point 1. And they even come up with plans of attack, things that we should do or should do differently. It's number 3, selling the stuff inside your firm, implementing it intelligently, minimizing disruption. And so maybe we'll focus on that one a little bit more as we continue our conversation. But I think 3 is unbelievably critical, because a lot of times we even do 1 and 2, but then we never, how many plans at law firms never get the trigger pull, right? For a host of reasons. And then they just sit on the shelf. Strategic plans are obviously a perfect example of that. We do them and then they sit on the shelf. They never get implemented. But we feel good that we created a plan. But anyhow, number 3, we might focus on that as we kind of continue through our demo here.
Okay, great point. Okay, now you're probably sitting here like, why do I care about becoming more efficient and cost effective with my administrative operation, trying to recover this 1 hour of non-billable work and turn into a billable work for my attorneys? If you're in the AmLaw 100, your profits are 9 to 12% year over year. You're making money, more money now than you ever have. Because at some point, it's not going to be like that. Okay, there's a whole slew of reasons. AI and the billable hour is going to be either an opportunity or a threat. You're not going to be able to increase your rates at a double-digit pace, as some firms have been doing over the last couple of years. Yesterday was the 6th-year anniversary of COVID. We're finally, learn how to handle that, but still a lot more learning to do there in terms of a hybrid workforce and so on like that, and how do we deliver services effectively. So yeah, may not be top of the list right now, but at some point it's going to be. And the more efficient we can make your administrative services, because right now when we see it, we're seeing anywhere from 20 to 40% of overcapacity in administrative services. The more effective we can make that, better off we're going to be. Bill, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think, just thinking back on my decades of law firm management, a lot of the work we would do was almost preparing, almost like preparing for the next thing. COVID, for example, popped up out of nowhere. I think we still don't fully understand the impact of all the things that occurred during COVID, but the firms that were prepared, the more we knew about our operations, who was doing what, what kind of work was being affected by the changes and things like that, the better the firm was able to respond to that sort of crisis of the day. And and today technology changes kind of continue to come. AI is obviously a big question mark. There's going to be something behind AI. But
Absolutely.
the key though is positioning yourself as a professional to basically be in control, or as much control as you can get, is understanding your environment, having information, having data, to base decisions off of, things like that. Those are the things that I think not only make our jobs as legal management professionals more enjoyable, but it also makes you more effective. You can respond faster, your answers are more complete, they're better, and so being prepared is, I think, the underlying motto of sort of all of this.
You sound like a Boy Scout.
Even if
Yeah.
there's not a hot need today, it's coming. It's
Well,
coming.
absolutely agree 1000%. Well, why don't you show everyone how we at Mattern, when we do a benchmark of administrative operation, how we gather your time and costs on administrative and from an attorney non-billable viewpoint.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen very quickly. And I think I'm just going to start by showing you a questionnaire that we use, which we send out. It's actually, the system is called Revelation Legal, and it's designed to capture basically work information about each employee of the firm from the employee. So, because they're obviously the best source of information about how they are spending their time. But we capture information directly from each employee and we morph that data. We build a data set off of that, and we then use that for our ongoing analysis. But it's not just any old questionnaire. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see what it looks like. Guess I'm full screen. I'm just going to do this one. See that okay?
We can see it okay.
Great. So this is just a sample of the questionnaire that we send out. And each employee sees the same screens, and they basically just tell us what types of activities they spend their time on. Now, if you ask any employee, just pick an activity, how much time, like pick an average legal secretary, and you say, I want to know how much time that legal secretary spends processing US mail, physical mail that comes into the office, deliveries and such, right? So you can imagine the answers are going to be all over the board, from 0 to a ton, right? Depending on the practice, depending on where you're at and all that kinds of things. So everybody's answer will be different. But if you ask the question, literally, every single person is going to say, I don't know. They're good, and they're not lying to you. They literally don't know how many hours they spend on this kind of stuff, right? And if you don't know how many hours, then there's nothing for you to work with as a manager. You're trying to collect information to base decisions off of. And so what we did is we designed this very special survey, or questionnaire is better described as, and we administer it to each person. And in here, they basically tell us how they spend their time. But we never ask them how many hours they spend on each activity. What we're doing is we're taking their job as a whole, which can be, um, 22,000 hours a year or 1,500 hours a year, or they might be part-time and only 500 hours per year. It doesn't matter. We figured we get those hours later, but initially we simply say, how much of your time do you spend doing these activities? And so as you can see, the responses here are all done by percentage, not by hours. And so as we move through this survey, it just drills down into more and more detail. And you can see the categories are on the left-hand side of the screen here. And again, the employee simply is saying, I do this activity and I do a lot of it, or I do a little. And from each of their responses, we get a percentage of their time. And as you can see, as we continue this exercise, it's easy from the employee's perspective because they're simply telling us, do you do these activities on the left, yes or no? And if the answer is yes, Do you do a lot of it or do you do a little of it? Because you're basically slicing your time in buckets as you move through it. And so this is a very unique approach, but it's immensely powerful. So what this does for us, though, is it gives us a profile. This is effectively, for those of you with an HR background, you'll be familiar with something called a job analysis, right? A job analysis is when you, in the old days, you would sit down with a yellow tablet and you would start asking the employee, what do you do all day? And you would have a conversation and you would make notes. And from those notes, you would deduce a job analysis and try to say they spend 10% of their time doing this and 10% of the time doing something else. So this system does it automatically. So the employee fills out the questionnaire, takes them about 15 minutes for an average secretary, and we get this profile. And this profile basically shows us the answers to the questions they provided us with the questionnaire. So this is a high level breakdown. This person only performs support services, no legal. If there was legal, this would be partially blue. And then we break down that time into some big buckets here: mail, word processing, meetings. And then down below, we break it down even further. So you can, so this is basically this person very quickly describing for us their job in detail. With the answer though, Rob, we get the three pieces of data that are the holy grail of this effort, which is how much time do they spend on each activity? Well, first of all, what activities do they do? That's what's listed here. How much time do they spend on each? You even have the percentage of the total, so that's available if you need it. And then most importantly, we can see the cost. And the cost is simply derived by taking the cost of the employee, so their salary and benefits costs, and we allocate it based on these percentages to the total. And we quickly deduce that this person spends 20% of their time, or 416 hours, on delivery services, and that's costing you as an employer $21,000 a year in direct cost based on their actual comp and benefits. And just to drill into that for one more second, I'm going to scroll back to the top of this report. And right here, you'll see what we call the demographic information for each employee. This is provided to us from each firm. And it basically tells us who the person is, where they live, what office, their job title, the department, and their comp, total comp, and their benefits percentage. And with that, we can see that this person's total comp is 105,000. And that's the amount that we allocate down below. So again, the questionnaire is quick, 15 minutes for a typical staff person. You get what they do all day, how much of it do they do, and what does it cost you? And this isn't conjecture. This is based on feedback direct from the employee, and then everything else is mathematic. So there's no supposition, there's no bias introduced by whoever's doing the interviewing, or supervisors aren't taking a wild guess and manipulating the response. It's literally the employee going through these and saying, I do it, I do a lot of it, or I do a little of it, or I don't do it at all. And then us massaging that into this output. And the fun part, I'm sorry, Rob, the fun part, I mean, I'm almost done, is that you have this for every single person who completes the survey.
Okay,
So here's
I don't want you to be done yet, Bill, because I would love for you to show. Okay, let's take it from a firm viewpoint, aggregate wise. What kind of information are we getting?
Okay, great. So before I jump to that, though, you can see that we have one for each employee of the firm. So as you pick them, it's right. So now this is an associate who filled out the same survey, and you can see the amount of breakdown we have for that associate. And again, here's their legal activities, which of course they put in timesheets. So you've seen that before, but here's all their non-legal activities. Okay, so you have that for every person in the firm. Now, what Rob's jumping to is you can do a ton with just that, right? Just as individual reports, you can do a ton, because now I know each employee, and I know what they're doing and how much of it they're doing it, and what it costs us. But what Rob's referring to is the power of when you take that data set and compile it into one single data set. So that is what we call our compilation report. So this is just a sample firm, but this is a firm that had about 500 lawyers, and I can't even remember the participation rate on this particular one, but it's not relevant to the conversation. But basically, we had employees participate, and their total comp and benefits was over $85 million. That's the total number right here. Through the questionnaire, we allocated 965,000 hours of labor, and that's partners, associates, mailroom clerks, secretaries, all of their hours rolled together. And I'm talking about hours they worked. I don't care whether they're billable, non-billable, I don't care. I just want to know what you did and how much of it you did. And so that's the 965 hours. But down below here is where you can drill in to the detail. So I'm going to click on support services. These are our categories of support services. And even at this high level, so this is high level, it's not even into the details yet. We can see that in administrative support services, as a firm, this is because this isn't filtered yet, because this is everybody. This firm spent 295,000 hours worth over $13 million. So if we want to know what that was spent on, we simply select it and it drills down. Here are the buckets within administrative support: word processing, meetings, mail, so forth. And you can see the hours in total devoted to each of these types of activities. So for example, if your firm wanted to, this, one of the great things about this, the compilation report, is it allows you to identify and quantify strategic initiatives of the firm. All right. So I might be jumping ahead just a little bit, Rob. So
No,
apologize
don't
if I
worry about
am.
it. I'll catch up with you.
But I'm gonna filter this so that we only see legal personnel. So now this cuts out. We're only down to $47 million. And I'm going to drill into support activities again. So this is now how your legal personnel, as defined by the firm, it's obviously all your attorneys, but sometimes firms include other paraprofessionals like paralegals and others in that bucket as well, but it's up to the firm. Who's in that bucket versus in the staff bucket. But in any event, we can see how they spend their time here. So just by at this high level, your firm management might look at this and say, okay, 13, almost 14,000 hours spent by our legal personnel doing some form of administrative support activities. And if I want to know what those are, I can drill in, as I said. But as a firm, right now, to one of Rob's earlier points, as a firm, you can come back and say, we're going to set an objective of capturing 25% of that number, right? So roughly 3,500 hours, and converting those hours from the legal personnel to billable hours. And the way you do that, right, is you give those hours back to the attorneys, and wink, wink, you hope they turn them into a billable hour. But you want to free the attorneys up from these activities. So where do you find that? To achieve that goal, you just have to find 35 hours somewhere in these buckets that where attorneys ought not to be spending their time. And it looks like it's actually going to be probably pretty easy to do as you drill into these things. Like, for example, it looks like they're spending almost 3,000 on just meeting setup and logistics and stuff. Now, why would that be? But here's the thing about Revelation Legal is it gives you the roadmap of how to implement this. So you can just drill into these things and say, well, who are these people? All I have to do is click on this, and it drills into that particular activity, and it says, these are the people. This is how many hours over here on the right that they're spending on meeting setup. And so all you have to do is try to recoup these hours by talking to these individuals or talking to the practice groups and saying, okay, attorneys, stop. They shouldn't be doing this ever. Right. And you can do that as an initiative and formulate that. But it's a quantifiable and attainable goal because you can see how many hours you're targeting and who the individuals are that need to change their behavior. So sorry, Rob, I
No,
drilled in a
no,
little bit deep.
no,
Uh,
that's fine.
uh,
Okay. Oh,
That's
a couple questions or a couple comments. Um, Again, we want to take away from the attorneys and non-billable tasks that we could delegate to the administrative side to increase that utilization. Meeting coordination is definitely one, document processing. Another one, we want to take that out of the attorney's hands in order to make them hopefully bill additional hours. Um, Gathering this information from start to finish, we're talking 60 days. By the time we set up the survey, by the time we distribute it to the end users, again, it takes about 15, 20 minutes. We get the information back, we compile it, and that gives us an excellent snapshot based upon what's going on. Now, I tell you, there are firms out there that are installing workflow software like Big Hand and something like that, or ServiceNow, gathering the data over the course of a year, analyzing it, making decisions. This gives you excellent data right up front, or really within 60 days, to start formulating plans. And that's exactly what we do. Once we get this data back, and again, the step two here is to create this plan. We start looking at this data and say, hey, listen, how can I make this more efficient? Everyone, all my legal assistants are doing 1 hour of word processing a day. Can I pull that either in-house or outsourced, either geographically together or geographically dispersed, and take that away from legal assistants? Again, to either give them additional tasks that could come from the attorneys, or do I need as many? Or can I give them additional duties to do that fall within their lines? So having this information gives us the ability to really come up with a plan to make your operation much more efficient and cost effective.
I'm doing this real quick while you're talking, Rob.
Okay.
So I filtered by support staff. I click on support activities, administrative activities, word processing. So you can see now 55,000 hours are spent by your staff doing word processing. And you can see who those people are and who's doing it. This is all sortable. So you can see all right, here's a legal assistant that's spending 2,000 hours a year. So almost the entire job. So
Right.
this person, right? I mean, it's amazing. But this is the kind of insight you get. But here's the thing about most of our efforts to do this, Rob, without a tool like Revelation Legal, is you just never have the ability to have such detailed representation of each person's role, because they say the devil's in the details, right? Well, it's just like, I think the quality result is in the details, right? So if you don't have this, you're going to make a lot of guesses. You're going to say, on average, our secretaries do X. Based on a sample size, our secretaries do Y. And it's all averaged, it's all supposed. It's not, you don't know. You don't actually know. This changes that. You don't have to do that ever again. You can say, I know, I know. You never say exact, right? Because we're measuring human behavior. So this isn't mathematically precise, even though it looks like it is. It's not mathematically precise, but it is it is frankly the best representation available on what people are doing, how much of it they're doing, and how much of it is of their job, quite frankly. So very powerful.
Yep. Okay. Very nice job there, Bill. Okay. So we have all this data. We start looking at more efficient, cost-effective ways to do it, whether it's internally. Outsourcing is a great solution if you structure it correctly and have a strong contract with detailed performance standards, and you partner with the right service provider. Outsourcing can be a great way to solve or offload some of these functions and increase the quality and the availability. You can run it 24/7 very easily, outsourcing. More difficult in-house. But again, you can do it in-house. A lot of firms choose not to, but outsourcing is a great way to do that. Okay, so we have the data. We start coming up with plans. Firm chooses the right which plan they would like to implement. and then we have to do it. Okay. It's Bill
Can I,
Mech.
Rob, can I tell a story? Or I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sure.
You were
No,
going to
tell a
ask me.
story. Is it about a flower
Well,
shop? Because I already
it's
covered that
not,
one.
that was
Okay.
an excellent storyline, by the way.
Okay.
I got all warm inside. It was an excellent story. But this is a real life story. So, and I won't mention any names, because I don't know, some of their firms may be on this call. But there was a firm that it was a decent sized firm, and they were in the process of creating an admin center in the United States. They picked a low cost city, and they were trying to move people in this particular case from the West Coast. And this happened to be their accounting department, but it could have been any department. And they basically said, we have an accounts payable department. Say there's 10 employees in it processing AP for the entire firm, and it's based in San Francisco. And they wanted to move it to this low cost city. And they did not have Revelation Legal. And absent this, what do you think they would do? Right? They said, well, we've got 10 people there. It's a job that essentially should be able to be done virtually, right? And so they just said, let's relocate those 10 positions to our low cost city. We get them out of our high rent area. They don't need to be there, and we move them to the low cost area. It sounds simple, right? Here's the devil in the details. So this firm did it literally days after flipping the switch. They eliminated the 10 positions. And they gave them an offer, by the way, to move. And I think a couple of them might have, but most of them did not, which shouldn't surprise anybody. But as a result, they moved and they started doing the AP functions with a couple legacy, but mostly all new people from the center. And that was going along okay, but it was bumpy, as you would imagine that transition to be. But here's where they got into a lot of trouble, is they didn't realize that those 10 AP people in San Francisco were doing things other than strict AP, which happens all the time in our law firms, right? We don't fit people in neat little boxes all the time. Sometimes you do, a lot of times you don't. They just pick up odds and ends, little jobs here and there. In particular in accounting, you see this very frequently. And so, but what happened though, is when they eliminated those 10 positions, there's no gray area there. They're gone. So whatever those people were doing in San Francisco is no longer being done. And they moved the AP tasks to the low cost center. Everything they missed hit the fan. And all of a sudden they were hiring people back, and so now they had duplicate staff, and things were confused, and people had egg on their face. It was all terrible. The reason it occurred is because they did not have a report that looked like this, that said, this is what the person does completely. This is their whole job. And so if I eliminate this position or move it, I better account for all this stuff. Okay, this is a good example. Say I'm going to outsource this one. They do mail services. Well, guess what? Mail services can't be in another location. It's physically received at the primary location. A lot of this stuff could be virtualized, but not all of it. And so that insight allows you to intelligently develop an implementation plan that avoids that super big pitfall, which I know one firm it happened to particularly, but I know it happens all the time, quite frankly. And it's because you don't have that insight. You just miss it until, of course, it's too late.
Great story, Bill. Great story. Even better than the flower shop. But okay, so again, gather all the data. Let me ask you a question, Bill. When we do this survey in firms, what is the biggest pushback?
Well, there's a couple different ones. Staff, obviously, all just feel like anytime we undertake an effort like this, it's because we're firing somebody, right? They just it's a knee-jerk reaction. Sometimes there's some truth to it. or maybe we're trying to right size, which doesn't mean everybody's going to lose their job, but maybe you're going to right size. So that is the messaging component on the front end, and you have to have some focus groups. You have to have really good communications. We spend a lot of time talking to each firm about their culture, about how their staff is likely to react, and how to circumvent that, whether to have some town hall meetings, give people forums to ask and answer questions and things like that, so that you can put people at ease as much as possible. And there's a few other tactics we would employ to do that, but that's a big one on the staff side. The attorney side is simply just the age old thing that I don't have time to do this. I am fully committed to my job at the firm, and I have no time to do this whatsoever. And it's really funny. I'll actually tell you a story that, or just a response I got. I was actually demoed this to a firm in Australia. They have a very different perspective of this thing, but these are like the COOs of Australian firms. And we went through this, and they saw how this really enables attorneys to get all the crippy crap stuff off of their plate so that they can focus on high value legal work, which is what they all really want to do most. And so he was like, when we showed this to this firm, the COO of that firm said, I don't understand why every lawyer in the firm isn't clamoring for this. Like they should be the first ones over the finish line with this, because this is like all juice for them, right? This is all benefit for them. With a minimal investment of a questionnaire, we can, take big moves to improve the focus of their job and stuff like that. So he's like, he just didn't understand why attorneys wouldn't be all over this. And and that was coming from an attorney. So it was very compelling. But anyhow,
Yeah,
that's the messaging. So again, you just have to have senior buy-in. You need to have the practice group heads or the managing partner saying, look, this is really important to the firm and so forth. So it just needs to be messaged. But that's the big pushback on the attorney side, is
absolutely.
just time. Yeah.
Critical. Okay, we really only got about 5 minutes left. Let's talk about implementation. I got my data, I got my plan. I'm going to outsource some of it. I'm going to uh, do some in-house pool centralized, not geographically, but just from a function viewpoint. How do I roll this out without stubbing my toe? Okay. And it's really basic change management. I want to do some tests. I want to make sure that I have a flawless system that has been fine-tuned to your law practice. Okay, I want to communicate well. I want to choose my test areas critically to make sure that they are open-minded to a new workflow. I want to have a workflow tool in place. That's when a big hand or a ServiceNow is critical. Once I make these decisions, yeah, I'm not waiting for a year to gather data. I'm doing it based upon the data I'm getting from Revelation Legal, sitting down, analyzing it, benchmarking it, and creating scenarios that work based upon our experience. And then again, I still have to manage it. So I got to implement it and then manage it. And that's where, again, the workflow tools are critical. And roll it out in a step-by-step process. Get feedback along the way. Have a single point of contact that's going to be getting all the feedback, and be talking to the end users. Now, again, I greatly condensed that. Bill, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, you can't overemphasize the communication component. You have to be thinking about your audience, as diverse and unique as their perspectives will be. Each if you're geographically dispersed, every office has their own personality, their own culture, and so the messaging might have to be consistent but modified for each location. But a very effective communication plan is absolutely essential, even for what would be considered as small changes. I think probably the biggest mistake people make is that they think, look, this is small, and it's not going to affect very many people, and so let's just jump, just go,
Yeah.
pull the trigger, and it comes back to bite you almost every time. You either do the communication plan up front or you do it by a fire drill after, damage control and all that. So
Now, okay,
Communications key.
a lot of talk in the media about MSOs and so on like that. Okay, this is the type of analysis that has to be done to see whether it makes sense or not. Okay, if you want to get out of the entire administrative operation and outsource that, which is huge, but people are talking about it. This is the type of data that you need, and you need someone making sure that the RFP that you do or the contracts that you're signing are detailed, have the performance standard reporting, the whole 9 yards. So,
And
okay.
there's nobody better at that than Mattern.
Well, I wasn't going to
Appreciate
say
it.
that, but okay. There's a whole slew of questions that came in that they want me to respond privately, so I will do that. Bill, any closing remarks?
No, but just simply that the better you know your firm or department. And by the way, this tool is completely scalable. You can do just a department, you can do an office at a time. And the data can be compiled if you do it in segments like that. A lot of times for larger firms, we do that. We implement by geographic location and then just compile all the data to get a global view. But but basically, the better your data, the better your information, the easier everything becomes, and the more effective you become at implementing these types of changes and stuff. It's just that simple. The more conjecture, supposition, and guesswork that's in your plan or that your plan is based on, the higher your risk is. And Rob and I were talking earlier about, having basically one shot to do these projects. And I mean, I always describe it as it's like one strike and you're out kind of a thing. You don't get three strikes. It's one strike and
Right.
you're out. So when you go, when you have the meetings and you stand up in front of your partners or your practice groups or whatever it is, or your management committee, you need to know that you've got the best information you have available. And Revelation Legal is, well, you can see yourself. I doubt anybody's ever seen anything like this because it just doesn't exist in other places. So
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Again, please respond to those questions on the way out. I'd love to make sure that we're discussing topics that are of interest to the legal community, and deeply appreciate all the questions. And Bill, very nice job.
thank you. Thanks. Nice meeting everybody.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.